today the claim that I'm supporting is that NASA should halt all manned space exploration for the foreseeable future. I will begin by discussing that it is way more expensive to send man than it is a robot, and robots are much more efficient and more capable than people are. For example, according to Francis Slakey, a lecturer on physics and public policy at Georgetown University, human spaceflight is expensive. A single flight for the space shuttle costs $450 million. The International Space Station is unstable and a waste of money. So the International Space Station was created in a little bit above Earth's orbit, so that way people could perform experiments in space. And that is also just way too expensive and a waste of money, so people spent a lot of money on this to try to keep it up, and they've redone it a few different times, and it just hasn't worked out the way that they want it to. So Francis Slakey goes on to discuss that the space station was redesigned, but 20 prestigious scientific organizations agreed that it was a waste of time and money. It cost 3 times the $8 billion they were originally assigned to the project, and these 20 prestigious scientific organizations agreed that space science should be done through robotic and telescopic missions, because the vibrations that are caused by the movements of astronauts and machinery make sensitive experiments unstable, which just completely gets rid of the whole reason why they've created the space station, because if they can't perform sensitive experiments, then there's just no reason to have it at all. Robots also don't require the same amount of maintenance as people do. Robots are cheaper because they don't need to eat or sleep or go to the bathroom. They can survive in space for many years and be left out there, while humans need to come back, and that's just another cost that they have to consider. So that was according to NASA's Space Place. Robots can also withstand harsh conditions like extreme temperature or high levels of radiation. This could potentially damage people and have a lot of long-term effects that not everyone expects there to have. So there's a lot of dangers that go into this. Robots were built to do things that would be too risky or impossible for astronauts. For example, according to Francis Slakey, rovers can traverse planet's surface and test physical chemical properties of soil and then collect the samples they return to Earth. So they can do this while they're in space, while humans have to collect the samples and then bring it back in order to test it. Robots can do it right on the spot, so that's much more efficient. Another example would be one of the Mars rovers, which is Hedgehog, and it is more capable than a human. According to NASA's Space Place, Hedgehog was developed with Stanford, MIT, and NASA. It can explore small bodies like asteroids or comets with little gravity in a rough terrain. And it can also operate on all of its sides, so you don't have to worry about it knocking over, because on any of the sides it can operate. Another example of this would be one of the other rovers, known as Puffer, and it can flatten and duck down and investigate little tight areas which people cannot do, so it can get into the little nooks and crannies that people cannot reach. Buoy is another example of a rover, and it can float in water and roll its wheels on the underside of an icy surface while taking pictures and collecting data, so it can multitask more than a human ever could, which is more efficient. So humans also cannot withstand the harsh conditions of space, and there are a lot of accidents that can occur when they go up into space. So according to NASA, the hostile or enclosed environment can also be a hazard, because people need food, sleep, and exercise for individuals to be happy and healthy, but it is unattainable while in space because they're confined in this little environment, and there's no way for them to exercise, and because it's dark outside all the time, their circadian rhythm, it gets all messed up, and it's going to be hard for them to get an adequate amount of sleep. Radiation exposure, according to NASA, will also increase the risk of cancer, damage the central nervous system, alter cognitive function, reduce motor function, and prompt behavioral changes, which are all dangers that you can face when you go up into space. Isolation is another hazard, according to NASA. Isolation and confinement leads to sleep loss, circadian desynchronization, and work overload. The distance from Earth is another hazard. In event of a medical emergency, the distance from Earth is far too great for the person to get back in time for whatever they need. Gravity also has potential effects on the human body, especially after a long period of time. According to NASA, returning to Earth causes the body to readapt to the Earth's gravity, and individuals' bones, muscles, and cardiovascular systems are impacted from the time spent without standard gravity. So the longer that they're in space, the more their body's affected by the gravity loss or gain from whatever they are. Spaceflight has also cost lives in the past. On January 28th in 1986, the Challenger broke apart less than 2 minutes after launching, killing 7 astronauts on board. So this is always an issue when going into space because things are not always tested enough, so they don't know how dangerous they could be. That's according to Mike Wall, who is a senior space writer. Mike Wall continues to suggest and talk about the lives that spaceflight has cost in the past. So on February 1st in 2003, the shuttle Columbia and 7 astronauts were lost during re-entry into Earth's atmosphere. So again, just another danger that you could be possibly facing. They also do not test spacecraft enough, but they are creating innovative robots that can improve technology. So Mike Wall goes on to discuss that in the aviation world, it is common to fly a new aircraft a few thousand times. But due to cost issues, it is impossible to test spaceships. So they cannot test them before they go up into space, and that can be a potential hazard as well. There are the chances of dying in spaceflight. So Mike Wall goes on to discuss that the chances of losing an individuals in the shuttle mission can be compared to the chances of dying while trying to climb Mount Everest between 1922 and 2006, which was 1 in 49. So we should be sending more robots into space because there's far more that they can do than people. The new telepresence is a remote projection of human abilities into a machine, and it permits field study on other planets without danger and logistical problems associated with human spaceflight. This robot has enhanced strength, endurance, and sensory capabilities. That's according to Francis Slakey, so there's far more that this robot can do. There have also been advances in VR and teleoperation will improve the ability for humans to remotely control a variety of complex robotic operations in space. So this can do a lot more than humans, and that's according to Aldo Spadoni, an MIT grad in aerospace engineering, career of 35 years plus. Thank you.